Could we all, I guess, rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United
of
States
the
of
United States of
America,
America,
and to the
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
one nation, under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and
and
justice
justice
for all.
for all.
Thank you. Could we have the roll call, please?
Mrs. Fryrick,
Here.
Mr. Posnell,
Here?
Mr. Robinson,
Here.
Mr. Sanders,
Here.
Mr. Scalette,
He's here. He's here.
I see you. Okay. Mrs. Schrader,
Here.
Mr. Sears,
Here.
Mr. Sullivan,
Here.
Mr. Tillman.
Here.
Okay, thank you. A reminder, please mute yourself and silence all cell phones during the meeting. And this is their first opportunity for public comment. I think the public comment link is found on this page, and all comments and questions will be addressed to the president. Board and staff members will not normally respond to comments or questions during the meeting unless recognized by the president for this purpose. Comments will be limited at the discretion of the president to 5 minutes or less. Vince, do we have any comments?
Wendy does have the one up here. This is the only comment we have at this time.
Okay. Fair question. Okay. Okay. We have links to the regular monthly meeting of August 17th of 2020. If there are no corrections or changes, I would offer them to be approved as submitted. Hearing none, I think we can approve as submitted. Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Posnell. We're about a week and a half into the new school year with the hybrid learning, new model we're using this year. And I have to say, I've been very impressed with how everybody has been cooperating, abiding by regulations and rules, and in an effort to keep everybody safe, in an effort to keep going with a face-to-face learning. I think this is the best chance we have at having face-to-face learning for an extended period of time through this hybrid model. We have some other school districts nearby that are experiencing some difficulties with safety, and we have not experienced any of those to date. We hope that continues, and I just want to thank everybody for their efforts and for following the guidelines and following the rules and wearing masks and maintaining distancing and all of those kinds of things that are going to let us keep the school year open. So I want to thank everybody for that. The first item we have here on the superintendent's report is recommending approval of the flexible instructional days application that we discussed at the last meeting. So we're looking for a motion and a second to approve flexible instructional days.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Questions or comments? This can be a unanimous roll call vote, unless I hear votes to the contrary.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Thank you for that. We'll be submitting once we have minutes from this meeting approved, we'll be submitting those to PDE to finalize our application. Today was the last day that we could apply for. We applied for them already, but today is the deadline for application. The next item is the first read of proposed policy revisions for policies 103, 104, and 249. The vast majority of these policy revisions center around Title IX compliance. We're in compliance with Title IX the way we do things now as far as how we conduct investigations and those kinds of things, but this formalizes some of that process in writing. So this is the first read. It'll also be first read at the next meeting. We'll also have a second read in September, in October, and approval in October. So tonight is really a September board meeting because of Labor Day, we're having it in August here. So we're looking first read in September, second read and approval in October. And I'll entertain any questions on those policies at this time.
Dr. Williams, this is Steve Sullivan. Can you account for the change in the confidentiality language on page 2 under authority of the 249? We struck some confidentiality language, and I just wanted to know whether that was picked up elsewhere. It didn't appear to be picked up elsewhere within the document, or exactly what was the reason for that change.
There's confidentiality language in there in the under the news section for Title IX.
I got it. Thank you.
Yep. It's just shifting it around a little bit. And we're trying to keep in compliance with PSBA's legal department's recommendations. So there are going to be situations where we're going to have some language that we delete and it'll appear somewhere else. That's going to happen periodically during this process.
Other questions or comments?
Well, just a comment on style. This was something that I probably brought up too many times when I was on the policy committee, and that is to standardize something as nitpicking as the word district. Is it capital D or small d?
Or when
Whatever it is, let's be consistent.
When we're referring to, instead of saying York Suburban School District, we just say district, it's capital D. When you're talking about district in generalities, it's lowercase d.
In most of the references, I think, in these documents, it's a substitute for York Suburban School District.
Right.
As the district, for example.
Right.
And it's just, there's a mixed bag of capitalization in small letters.
Yeah, I tried to catch those.
I know that's nitpicky.
Well, I agree with you. And I tried to catch all those.
Page 2, second paragraph, no, third paragraph.
Which policy?
Well, where do I see the policy?
It's on the top of the first page.
Review of non-discrimination in employment practices.
That'd be 104.
Yes.
Okay.
Page 2, third paragraph. Be posted to the district's website.
That would be a lowercase d
Okay.
in that use there.
Stop there.
I'll go through and I'll find I'll look for the lowercase d and change it where it should be changed.
The other thing, which is much more substantive, Tim, is that all three of the policies that we're looking at tonight seem to have big blocks of common language. And I haven't gone through this thing with a fine-tooth comb, but just wanted to ask if they've been synchronized so that there's complete agreement when we refer to things like complaints, reports, and the procedures that seem to be very, very similar, if not identical,
Right.
in 102 and 103. I'm sorry,
Right.
103 and 104.
103 and 104, right. Right. Yeah, there are large chunks of similar or exact same text. Because in most cases, the procedures are the same, whether we're talking about
Right.
students or we're talking about employees.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And this is not the first crack we have at this, so we have several other meetings we can review these as well. All right, any other questions on those policies? Okay, item C, as per Board Policy 915, administration recommends that the York Suburban School Board sanction the following organizations for the 2020-21 school year. All Sports Boosters, Music Boosters, East York PTO, Indian Rock PTO, Middle School PSO, Valley View Elementary PTO, and Yorkshire PTO. We had a meeting with these folks last week as part of that policy, and just to explain procedures and reporting requirements, particularly for the All Sports Booster Club. So we're looking for board recognition of those booster clubs and PTOs.
So moved.
Second.
Would this be considered an all-inclusive list?
So far, yes. If any other ones would come about that we'd want to recognize, we'd bring them in a separate action. John, I think you're muted.
I am. A lot quieter that way though, isn't it? So with no more questions, this can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
The next item, I'd like to thank KO Industries, LLC, local York business, for their donation of 24 bottles of hand sanitizer at the value of $179.96 that they have given to the district. We use them where we need them. So there's no action on this. We're just required to notify the board of donations, and this is a donation we've received recently. And the conclusion of the superintendent's report is a report from Mrs. Hassan-Foos, Director of Pupil Services, and she will be, she has the nursing staff on our call here today to talk about the current scenario for nursing York Suburban. Natalie.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Tonight we have our 3 certified school nurses on the call. We've got Carla Kaufman, who is the nurse at Valley View and the high school. Diane Hannock, who is the nurse at the middle school and Yorkshire Elementary. And Krista Wolfenberger, the nurse at East York and Indian Rock. The ladies have prepared a brief presentation on being a 21st century school nurse with a particular focus on how they've been supporting students, staff, and the community during the COVID-19 pandemic. With that, I will turn it over to, I believe Diane is the first to speak.
Yes, the nurses want to thank everybody for having us this evening. Am I still going to be able to share my screen, Natalie?
Question for Wendy, but I think
Yes,
she's going to allow you.
Okay.
That should work, Diane.
Okay, so the nurses wanted to, again, thank everybody for letting us come in tonight to speak. We would like to talk a little bit about what it's like to be a 21st century school nurse for the York Suburban School District. This framework is a framework that comes from the National Association of School Nurses, and it truly guides how we provide the care throughout the year, but especially during the pandemic. This goes over each category or the subcategory of the 21st century school nurse. We have our standards of care that we practice: care coordination, leadership, quality improvement, and community public health.
And you're not sharing, do you?
I'm sorry, what?
You're not sharing.
Oh, okay. I thought it was going. One moment, please. There we go. There we go. Thank you. So these are our categories that we follow for school nurses, and we're going to touch base a little bit on each one of these this evening. So the first one is our standards of practice, and this is what actually guides our care. We're continually reviewing current best evidence related to COVID-19 through the National Association of School Nurses, our Centers for Disease Control, and obviously the PA Department of Health and the American Academy of Pediatrics. We have created updated guidelines for all aspects of our care over the summer, and specifically we have updated our COVID-19 guidance for how we practice nursing in our district as it relates to the pandemic. And we provide school nursing care based on our code of ethics and our standards of practice in areas such as FERPA. Obviously, that's a very important aspect with COVID. We want to make sure that we are respecting our students and our families and our staff's confidentiality. And then school law, for instance, as it pertains to 504 plans and continuity of care with our students with chronic health conditions. And we're continuously following evidence-based practice. And Carla?
Actually, it's Krista. So leadership
Okay,
is
Krista.
the first component. And I've been working for York Suburban for the past 12 years. And now more than ever, I see that the nurses have been working with the administrators to promote the role of the school nurse. We work really closely with the nurses in York County. We have monthly meetings and we gather information and collaborate with them as well as other nurses in the county so that we're all following best practices to keep our staff and our students healthy and safe. We've suggested improvements to the Infinite Campus Health site, things like the attendance tracker for not only flu-like symptoms, but the COVID-like symptoms that we're dealing with right now. When the administrators have reached out to us for guidance over the summer, we created the daily screening tools that we use every day for staff and students, and even some visitors that are allowed to come into our buildings, as well as the guidance tool that we've created to when a student or a staff member is able to return to work or school. Many of these actual tools have been shared with these other district nurses in the area when they're looking for guidance, because I really do believe that they feel that we're the experts in our school nurse setting. We've recently updated our procedure manuals to include evidence-based practices when caring for the sick and injured students that we see. For staff, we take the lead to educate our teachers on best practices for responding to student emergencies. And for the most part, we're the nurses at York Suburban and we've got this.
Carla?
Yeah. Good evening, everybody, and I'm going to discuss care coordination. We manage the care of students with chronic conditions such as diabetes, severe allergies, asthma, cardiac conditions, and digestive issues, just to name a few. We administer daily and as-needed medications and treatments to our students. We develop their emergency care plans, individual care plans, and we collaborate with our guidance counselors and administration to make the 504 plans with medical components for our students with health conditions. We are creative in how we deliver care to our students with chronic conditions, as well as transiently ill or injured students, in order to protect the health and safety of our students, staff, and the community. We educate and support our students, staff, and families concerning COVID-19 recommendations, their wellness status, and how that impacts attendance as guided by the CDC and the Pennsylvania Department of Health. We assist with the continuity of education during normal times as well as during the COVID-19 pandemic, especially when students need to be quarantined. We serve on the interdisciplinary teams within the district in order to support students during the pandemic and always. We constantly communicate with one another since we are in charge of different buildings concerning sibling groups, so that we can stay on top of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to potentially quarantine sibling groups. We have transformed some of our health rooms into trauma-informed so that we can meet the social, emotional needs of our students during the pandemic and always. And we are all on the district's team of 20, a group made of the nurses, teachers, counselors, and administrators that has the goal of understanding and managing trauma in our students. And we also collaborate multiple times per week, sometimes in a day, with the Pennsylvania Department of Health in order to ensure that we are properly applying the CDC and Pennsylvania Department of Health recommendations and guidelines in the care and decision-making regarding quarantine of our students.
And then we have quality improvement, which is another aspect of the 21st century school nurse that we follow. We're continuously evaluating and revising our YS nursing procedures as it applies to COVID-19 and the current pandemic based on the best evidence, just like Carla said. And we're looking at the CDC and the Pennsylvania Department of Health and daily, many times a day actually. Ongoing evaluation of our electronic health recording to improve accuracy of data collection for practice improvement in the school health request for reimbursement system, which is our SHARS report. And we're beginning to track COVID-like illness. Just today, we were able to sit back and make the decision that we wanted to make sure that we're putting COVID-like symptom drop down so we can start keeping track in Infinite Campus of that specific type of visit now that we're seeing more kids who have symptoms, potential symptoms, excuse me. We participate in our district and building level committees for wellness, trauma-informed care, all hazards, safety, threat assessment, students during the pandemic. And we also develop and have ongoing evaluation of emergency action plans, individualized healthcare plans, and 504 plans for our students to ensure effective coordination between their health and academic needs as it applies to the COVID-19 and this pandemic, but really it's all the time that we're doing those things. Krista?
It's Carla, actually.
Oh, Carla.
She'll get us confused. Okay. During the 1920 school closure for COVID-19, we took that opportunity to revise the health room site and make it a one-stop shop for the entire district. We can be found under departments now. Under the nurse link, you can find announcements per building, health guidance, and health-related activities for students of all ages. We are all members of the York County School Nurse Association, the Pennsylvania Association of School Nurses and Nurse Practitioners, as well as the National Association of School Nurses, so that we can remain up to date on county, state, and national guidance and information related to school health, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. We work with Family First to provide free dental exams, x-rays, and prophylaxis for students without dental insurance. In fact, last year, over 100 students benefited from that program, and about half of those were referred for further dental care. We also work with our school physician through WellSpan to provide medical exams to students that do not have medical insurance. We provide vision and hearing screens to students, and we have identified many students that have vision and hearing concerns that otherwise would not have been identified. And for students with vision concerns, due to our memberships in the National Association of School Nurses, we are able to request vouchers that are good for local practitioners that will provide free eye exams to uninsured students. We receive those vouchers, of course, free of charge. It's all part of our membership. We work with the Pennsylvania Department of Health to assist students that are in need of required immunizations yet are uninsured. And through our building newsletters, we promote health, and also through social media as well.
Krista?
So as you can see, the last few slides and all the different things that we do, for us, that really hasn't changed. I think the biggest change for me in my nurse's office this year is I see less children. And the only reason that is we've kind of updated our guidance for when students need to come see the nurse. So they have a tummy ache or they have a headache. We've instructed teachers to call us and we go to them as opposed to them coming to us. So think of our offices more as a sick incubator per se, where kids that we really feel need to be there will be there. In the spring, we decided to update a lot of our protocols, and one of those was our pandemic planning. We worked really closely, since we're in a pandemic right now, with our administrators and our principals, and that took place through Zoom sessions and phone calls about reentry and how we were going to work things. We stayed current on webinars to guide how we were going to keep up to date on all these changing, sometimes it was daily, changing. For instance, we had come up with the screening tool for our staff and our students, and we were all ready to roll it out, and Friday comes and the Department of Health made some changes. So we quick redid everything and sent that out to the administrators, and it was ready to go on Monday. So a lot has changed, but a lot has stayed the same. We're still important. We're still working to be the experts in our field and do the best we can for our students and our staff during this pandemic. The tracking tools, the updated COVID tracker, that's a district-wide. We can see in a snapshot what's going on throughout the district. We helped devise that, and that's been a really, really great tool. Like Carla and Diane both have said, you know, we speak to each other almost on a daily basis, and a lot of that is with families, with emails, with phone calls to the families, because a student has presented this way in one building and they have siblings in another. So we've really stepped up our game as far as working with families. I think we have replacing the students actually seeing us in our offices have been replaced with making those connections with the families through phone calls and emails. So we hope to continue to do that for York Suburban.
And finally, I'm going to take just a few minutes to show you a few of the forms that we've been working with administration to help provide care for our families and our students and our staff. And the first one is our COVID tracking form, which I have to say to me is one of the best things that we have done, because it's allowed us to be able to keep track of what's happening in each one of our buildings. And then we are able to share this information with the administrators so that we can all stay on target. Again, we're collaborating with our school counselors so we know when kids are able to come back. If they've been out on quarantine, we keep track of telephone conversations that we have with our families. It really is a lot of time. In all of the years I've done school health, I think I've learned more in the last month than I've learned my entire career as a school nurse. But I have enjoyed it. But this is one of the tools that I think has been the most beneficial. We also created a flow chart, and I won't go into a whole lot of detail, but this is something that we use in our nurse's office for us to help guide our care. So we can sit there, and if we have a question about something, and again, this is all based on the most updated CDC and Department of Health guidelines, it just gives us a quick reference. So we're able to take a phone call from a staff member or a family member. Maybe the mom has been exposed to COVID or has tested positive. It allows us to be able to make a quick reference for how to, assist them in. Although we're not contact tracers, we do actually do contact tracing within our school setting. So that's been very helpful. We also, somebody mentioned the screening tools. I'll just show you one of them. I'm sure that you all have seen these. Again, we've had to revise it numerous times, and we actually had to switch to a different way of making it because of all the changes that were happening. But these are the screening tools that we have for both our students and our staff. I will say that I'm hoping that as a district that we can encourage our families to make sure that they are using this. I think each one of us have had experiences over the last couple days and last week where we've had students come in and they've come in with symptoms in the morning that could be COVID related. And so I just hope that we can share out. I'm gonna let Carla jump in there if she doesn't mind. She had an experience, I think today, wasn't it?
Yep, today there was a student that needed to be quarantined because he was having COVID-like symptoms, including a fever. And when I was speaking to mom, she became a little, upset. She was understanding, but she was still upset. And she said that she's an essential worker and it's only a tool. So some parents we found aren't doing the screening tool on their students every day because it's called a tool and they feel that it's optional and it's just kind of something that you can use for guidance, but not something that is mandatory.
And I like to tell my families whenever I speak to them, you know, that we want to stay open. We want our kids to come in and be able to learn. And for us to be able to do that, we have to make sure that we're keeping a good tight control over students who may be symptomatic. So that's kind of how I try to communicate with parents about why these tools are important. And same with our staff. Our staff has to understand the importance of always checking in the morning and calling in and asking questions if they're concerned about symptoms, as opposed to coming in and maybe asking the nurse first thing in the morning to check their temperature. And then finally, we did also devise a guidance that we're giving parents. I actually use this now when I send a student home. I circle all the symptoms that they have. And at the bottom, I circle that whole big section at the bottom because there's different ways that a student can come back after they've been out sick. I know the Department of Health has said that certified school nurses are allowed to clear students to come back. I don't know that I feel like that is within my, I don't know that I'm not a doctor and I can't say whether they can come back or not, but they do allow us to, I think they put that in there so we can work with our families. Let's say maybe they're having allergy symptoms. We want to make sure that, we can also release them to come back to school. So those are some of the things we've been working with administration as far as tools. And the last slide is just our contact information. And I think we have time for questions if anybody has anything specific they would like to ask.
Looks like you're off the hook.
Well, Steve Sullivan, sorry, you had to know you weren't going to get away without a question for me. Sorry. I'm assuming the tracking system supports reporting to building administrations and the district administration about quarantine counts, that sort of thing. I don't care about like subclinical symptom counts, but if you had to send some, if you had to suggest that someone be quarantined, who learns about that and how are we going to hear about it and on what frequency?
Well, I can tell you from the nursing perspective, and then I'll let administrator fill in on their end. But from our end, I'll give you a typical example. Just today, I sent a student home, potentially symptomatic, so they had to go home. I actually called the Department of Health because now what we're seeing is we have students who are coming in with symptoms, say in my building, and we might have a sibling over in another building. At what point do we quarantine them? So we got our question answered to that. And then I notify, because we have to make sure we're keeping track in the computer, we want to make sure that we're sharing information on a need-to-know basis, but always respecting privacy. So our counselors who are helping keep track of the academic portion of it are notified. We notify our building administrator and our attendance secretary. And then once the student's released to come back, Krista had a great idea that we green everything out. So it's fun kind of going down through our tracker system and seeing those green lines pop up. Then we know our students, it kind of comes full circle. We know they're cleared to be back in school. And so yeah, that's how we're doing it. And then the administration on their end, I'm assuming that they're looking at the big picture district-wide.
Thank you.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I appreciate your struggle with the screening form, that somebody could be confused over something with the very first subtitle word on the form being must. Wouldn't strike me as the kind of thing that folks could get terribly confused about. But you guys are obviously in a position as the keepers of the insulin and the inhalers and all the other things to reinforce with parents that they do in fact send their children to schools with classmates who are diabetic or asthmatic or survivors of childhood cancer or have other issues. So we certainly appreciate you guys being the front line in terms of the health education role. And that's as important for parents as it is for kids. Thank you.
Other comments? Now maybe you're off the hook.
Well, nursing staff and Natalie, thank you very much. Appreciate that report. And we'll look forward to having you back again next year around this time. And that concludes the superintendent's report for this evening.
Thank you. Business office, Mr. Tully.
Good evening. Our first item on the agenda is a presentation from PFM. They'll be presenting the results of the competitive bank loan RFP. In addition to PFM, we have Ken Phillips from RBC and attorney Steve Havis from Stock and Leader. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Jamie Doyle, and I will share my screen unless you want to share your screen, Jamie.
I'd be happy to share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. With me this evening from PFM are my colleagues John Fry and Melissa Hughes, as well as Ken Phillips from RBC, as Kathy just mentioned, and Steve Havis, your bond counsel. So just to go through the results of the competitive RFP process that you authorized earlier this month, we had fantastic results and certainly the market cooperated. If you look at the lower right-hand corner of page 1, oops, give me a second, I went too far. You can see that long-term fixed interest rates have hovered nicely at the all-time lows that we've been experiencing. That was all good news. On page 2, you can see that we received a lot of interest. We got 10 different proposals from 8 different banks, and the winning proposal came from JP Morgan Chase. They have proposed a fixed interest rate of 1.44%. That rate is indicative until it's locked in by board action this evening. So you know, we will report back to them after you vote on the resolution. And this proposal allows the flexibility of a call feature, so these bonds would be callable on May 1 of 2025. We got close, but we did not get to the finish line on the topic of this is a taxable loan, and we had asked them if they would be willing to convert to a tax-exempt rate should legislation change and allow for that. And we got close. We thought we were getting there, but they couldn't quite get there. So this will remain in taxable mode, but it will be your option as of that call date, May 1 of 2025. You know, if it makes economic sense at that point in time, you will have the ability to refund and go back into a tax-exempt rate if you so choose. Just to walk through the mechanics and ultimately get to the good news. If you look at page 4, you'll see your 2016 A bonds. That's what we're refunding with this transaction. We're not extending the debt at all. It will still pay off at exactly the same point in time, which is May 1 of 2029. And on this page, you can see your old interest rates, which range from a 1.5% on the short end to a 4% on the long end. Page 5 just shows the escrow that will be set up to make the payments on the old 2016 A series through and including the call date on that issue, which is November 1 of 2021. It's exactly why we're issuing this at a taxable rate, because that call date is a little further away than tax-exempt refundings allow for. And the important page, page 6, you can see the re-amortized schedule with the JP Morgan rate in column 3, the 1.44%, still matures May 1 of 2029, and net savings to the district came in at $791,777.44. If you start at the top of column 10 and work your way down, you can see that the way we've structured the savings is exactly what we discussed in August. You know, virtually no savings in the current fiscal year. The bulk of the savings next year, about $195,000 and change, and then the remainder of the savings in relatively level fashion over the remaining years of the loan. So I'll call that $85,000 a year for each of the remaining years. And that as a percentage came in at 8.46%, meaning net savings divided by the amount of principal we're refunding. And you may recall that the historic benchmark for a taxable advance refunding like this transaction is 3%. So you're well through that historic benchmark at almost 8.5%. And of course, the state does not get a share of your savings because they do not pay reimbursement on this issue. If you look at page 7, you'll see the sources and uses of funds. And ultimately this evening, if you accept the winning proposal that I've outlined, settlement will occur on October 13th. And of course, the rate that we'll report to the IRS as having refinanced this issue is just under that 1.44% mark. Look at page 8, you'll see your updated debt portfolio. So the payments on the 2016 A bonds go away, and we've added column 7 to reflect the series of 2020 this evening. As always, top half is gross debt service, meaning principal and interest on each of your series. And the bottom half is net of state reimbursement that you receive on some of your series. The last page is just a summary of some of the highlights that I just hit with you. In conclusion, I was very pleased with the process, very pleased with the team effort and all the assistance we received from Kathy in the business office. And, you know, very pleased to be able to deliver this level of results to you this evening. This is about $123,000 better than what we had shown you earlier in August. At this point in time, I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have before we turn it over to Mr. Hovis to entertain any questions on the resolution.
This is Joel. Jamie, no question, but I just want to say thanks.
Our pleasure.
Other questions? Okay.
Well, great. This is Steve Hovis, and I'm just going to take it over and do a short review of the resolution. Last week, we provided the district with a draft resolution, and I just want to touch on some highlights for the amendments that were made today. Based on the final pricing that we got today, we did revise the resolution to reflect the fact that you were authorizing a note issue in the amount of $9,908,000, and that's for the purpose of issuing your general obligation note series of 2020 for the advanced refunding of your 2016 A bonds. We did update the proposal. JP Morgan Chase Bank provided a new proposal dated August 31st. So that's been attached as Exhibit A. They did revise and update the interest rates. So the interest rate that is reflective as of today is that 1.44%. And therefore, as part of the resolution, you will be accepting the proposal from JP Morgan Chase Bank. And as noted, that note will have a maturity date of May 1st, 2029. We'll have an interest rate of 1.44%. Will be callable in 5 years. But for the first 5 years, it is non-callable as is described by Ms. Doyle. This is a general obligation note, so you are pledging your taxing power is basically the security for the payment of that loan. You are authorizing your officers to take any and all action necessary for not only the issuance of this note, but also the advance refunding of your 2016 A bonds. And otherwise, you're authorizing an application be filed with DCED, which is a requirement under the Local Government Unit Debt Act. And once DCED approves your application, you'll be able to proceed to closing, which we scheduled approximately on October 13th, 2020. So basically, mid-October, we'll be able to close this transaction and actually fund the escrow account for the advanced refunding of the 2016 A bonds. Ran through a pretty long resolution pretty quickly, but a lot of you have been through this before and you know what to expect. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Sounds like there are none.
Thank you very much.
Okay. There are no other questions. The administration recommends the board approve the resolution authorizing and directing issuance of the general obligation note series of 2020 in the principal amount of $9,908,000 as presented. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions or discussion?
John, I would just like to say hats off to Kathy for her hard work on this. I think this is a wonderful saving for the school district, and it might not have happened if we hadn't had Kathy's hard work. So hats off, Kathy. We thank you.
My pleasure.
If there are no other questions, I think we can have a roll call vote on this, please.
Absolutely. Mr. Sears,
Yes.
Mrs. Schrader,
Yes.
Mrs. Fryrick,
Yes.
Mr. Sanders,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Tillman,
Yes.
Mr. Posnell,
Yes.
Mr. Scalette.
He's here somewhere.
Oh, he just said thumbs up.
Yep. Motion passes.
Does that count?
Okay, thank you to the finance team, to PFM, RBC, and Attorney Havas. We appreciate you. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. If not, you are free. You're dismissed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Item C is a consent agenda. You have before you the business office report, which includes items 1 through 3. Would any board member like any of these items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of these items? If not, I would ask that a motion be made to approve the below mentioned items.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Questions or comments? And I think this can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. Item D is an item that we spoke about at the August 17th meeting. The administration recommends the board authorize the business office to advertise and solicit bids for the replacement of the doors at East York Elementary, Indian Rock Elementary, and YS Middle School to be funded out of Capital Projects Fund. May I have a motion?
Ellen, so moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Questions or comments? This can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. Item E and F, before I get into the motions, I've asked Mr. Wentz from Crabtree to just give the board a brief summary of the 2 change orders we'll be asking for board consideration.
Yes, thank you, Kathy. We received 2 change order requests, one from East Coast and one from Lauer. I'll go over Lauer's first, even though it's the second on the agenda here. That's item number F. They encountered while working on the pump building, the one in between Valley View and the high school, they encountered some conduit that had circuits in it that were either not functioning correctly or were no longer necessary and needed to be removed for the new work to occur. And they also encountered a disconnect. The circuits were for pumps 9 and 10. And then pump number 8 had a disconnect that was daisy chained together to a pump next to it, which essentially means if you try and use a disconnect, it's going to turn 2 pumps off instead of 1. That needed to be corrected. Now, these are items that came to light in the middle of working on the electric work, which means they had to take care of it at that moment or it wouldn't have gotten taken care of. They wouldn't have been able to finish the work that needed to be done. They did go ahead and do the work. And that came out to, for just time and materials, straight billing to the $3,200 and, sorry, I can't read it on my screen there. I'll have to go to my paper, $3,284.40. I do trust that they did the work and it was required. I did pass that by more engineering. They verified these are things that were existing inside conduits and it could not be seen. Therefore, it was an existing condition that could not have been prepared for until the conduit was open. Any questions related to Lauer's request?
This is Ellen. Is that something that happens frequently, infrequently on jobs, Seth? What are the odds we would have found this?
Well, the circuits are really hard to find. That's one of those things, until they start pulling wire and they see what's inside the conduit, you're really not going to be able to tell if there's circuits that are left over in there and you know, what kind of junk is inside the conduit. And without getting into the project, you can't really predict that. Existing drawings don't really show things like that, little element pieces inside the wire. So yeah, it's nothing that anybody could have seen or planned for. Now, as far as the daisy chaining the disconnects together, that's something that probably shouldn't have been wired that way in the first place. It basically, I don't know if you're familiar with the disconnects. It's basically like a on-off switch. It's like the GFI in your kitchen. And if they're all connected to the same line of electric, if the one GFI switch gets tripped, all the rest of the light switches along that row will no longer work. So they essentially encountered that, which is counterintuitive to the way you want them to function, because you want to be able to shut one pump off at a time so the other pump can continue working. Again, that's not something that would have been visible until you found out, you know, inside the conduits how the wires were run.
Would that have been on some other projects, drawings or something like that, that we may or may not have contact, you know, asked to see, or they should have the contractor should have asked to see? Should any red flags have been up initially?
We had access to all the drawings that existed for those, and there was no notes or any indication that that's the way it was put together.
Okay. This is probably for Kathy. Is this coming out of contingency or directly out of the bond issue, which is the contingency anyway, but.
This would be coming out of the bond issue.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Okay. Going on to East Coast. They also have an additional service request. I'm going to backtrack a little bit to the way this project was bid, just to refresh everybody's memory. When this project was bid, it was originally bid, well, it is bid as the three primes. There's the electrical, the general contractor, and then there's the mechanical plumbing contractor. So what we received in the initial bid for this were good bids from East Coast and from Lauer on electrical and general contractor. And during that bid, it was spelled out in the spec book that every prime was responsible for their own scaffolding. We did not receive a mechanical bid at that time, so the mechanical was rebid at a later date. An RFI was received during that rebid, asking if they would have access to the scaffolding of the general contractor. The direction was given by Crabtree Rollball that yes, they would have access. And during the descoping process, it was our intent to notify the general contractor that they were to factor in the access to the scaffolding into their number while they were descoped. Unfortunately, that didn't happen during that descoping process. It was an ever-changing process that was happening very quickly, and I am regrettable that I neglected to let them know that they were responsible for coordinating that. Now, that being said, East Coast did two things that saved the district a lot of money. They did not scaffold the entire pool. I don't know if any of you have been over there to observe the work, but what they have is a rolling platform scaffolding that's about 12 to 15 feet wide and spans the short length of the pool. And it moves on wheels back and forth. That saved a significant amount of money during that descoping process. Their fee would have been significantly higher had they scaffolded the entire area. Now, what that does require is moving the scaffolding when work needs to be done in a particular area. Since they didn't have the notification during the descoping, they didn't put money in there to move the scaffolding for other groups. Now, essentially what happened when this came to light, East Coast was actually a really good team player. And no matter what happened on other projects, they have really stepped up to the plate on this one. They offered to allow Silvertip and Lauer to have access to their scaffolding. They even put up extra safety measures to make the other teams happy with their requests. And they offered to help out in moving of the scaffolding. Now, Silvertip's work in moving the scaffolding ended up being more more of a time commitment than they had anticipated. So what this is them saying, okay, we're eating some of the time that we spent here and we're asking for some reimbursement in the additional time that it took to move this for all the times that it needed to be done for Silvertip to complete the mechanicals. Now, I did ask East Coast if we had communicated to them originally during the descoping that they were responsible for allowing Silvertip to have access to the scaffolding, what would this have been? And they said it easily, because they wouldn't have known what they were getting into. And this bill is a reduction of the time and just the time that was spent on it. They said this easily would have been twice the amount, which means their descoped estimate would have been about, $9,000 higher than what they proposed. That was a lot of information, but I felt it required the whole story to understand why they're asking for money for coordination.
Are there any questions for Mr. Wentz? Okay, hearing none. First item, the administration recommends the board approve change order number 2 for East Coast in the amount of $4,456.16 to cover the costs for providing labor to move scaffolding for the HVAC contractor. May I have a motion?
Have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
One question, please.
Okay.
In the detail, there's an hourly rate for the labor for moving the scaffolding, $56.01 per hour. Kathy, is that a prevailing wage rate? It's just an information item for me. I'm curious.
I believe it is.
Okay.
I would have to grab the spec book to confirm that. We have all the rates spelled out there.
Yeah, I don't have the formal documents with me, but I can circle back with the board. And
Yeah,
I
I'd
know,
like to have that before Rich and I meet with Senator Arnold.
yep, I kind of figured that, so I will get you that information.
Thank you.
Other questions? Then this can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. The second item, the administration recommends the board approve change order number 2 for Lauer Construction in the amount of $3,284.40 to cover the costs to remove and reroute existing circuits.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? This can also be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. And that concludes the business office report.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bowen.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So to begin my report, I'd like to thank the board and staff for all they've done this school year to make it as safe as possible. I've been in contact with students from multiple grade levels to see if any concerns have risen throughout the week. In elementary schools, specifically first and second grade, students are feeling overwhelmed with the workload on days off. While I don't really know specifics, the packets and papers given to them are taking around 3 to 4 hours to complete on their off days, which leaves little time for relaxation and playtime for the kids. Some students have also had homework on top of this work as well. This is concerning for students as well as caretakers, as the caretakers will need to find time in their schedules to sit down with their students to complete this work. Additionally, students in the high school are worried about things such as Zooming in the classroom, lunches, and the one-way hallway situation. Although these things can be solved by adaptation, some other things such as fear of the workload, if we need to go virtual, are still present within the student. To solve some of these problems, I've spoken with Dr. Ellis about possible solutions for things such as the possibility for junior privileges for lunch to create more space during that time period. I've not gotten in contact with many students who are participating in the TALK program, but I've heard that the workload, they're thinking or seeing that it's kind of insignificant compared to the workload from the hybrid learning. Although this could be because the program is so new, students are still afraid that they will not get as much out of it compared to being at school doing the hybrid. Lastly, I'd like to talk about what we are doing club-wise at the high school. So student council met on Wednesday to discuss possibilities for homecoming. And while those chances are low, we still hope to do something special for the event in the fall. Additionally, Minithon organized a parking spot chalk decorating event that took place last night at the high school, which I believe had a decent turnout. And with that, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for you, just one. You mentioned concern about load when they were at home. Everybody does realize that school is 5 days a week. Just because they're at home, there's no difference in load. There's no vacation in this discussion, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you talking about the TALK program?
No, I'm talking about the hybrid model.
Oh yeah. The for the elementary kids and stuff, I think it's mainly concerns with the parents not having enough time in their day for coming back from work and stuff like that to sit down with their kids if they would need help to
Okay, thank you.
Get done all of the work and packets that they send out. And
Okay, I think I lost you. Okay.
If I could raise a question as well, not to Ms. Bowen, but whoever might know the answer to this. So I heard something about Thon, I guess, having an on-campus fundraising event. Is that subject to the extracurricular health and safety planning requirements?
yeah, so the students were required to wear masks while we did this. However, it was outside at the parking spaces. I'm not quite sure how they spaced them out to do the chalk and stuff like that, but I can confirm that we have abided to all of the rules.
Okay, other questions? You have the link to the committee meeting schedule here. Mr. Robinson, Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Posnow. You have before you the personnel report, which includes positions and athletics extracurricular. Would any board member like any of these items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of these items? If not, the chair moves approval of the below mentioned items.
I have a question about.
Can I have a second first?
Sorry.
So moved.
Thank you. Now, go ahead, Ellen.
Okay. I have some concerns over the assistant business manager position. I guess this is the place where I throw this in. This is something I'm having a great deal of trouble trying to support at this time. It's not that I don't support it. I don't know. I know that we're talking about great savings through the bond issue refinancing, and we're looking at moving responsibilities within the business office around so that there will be some savings there. But at a point where we don't know what our revenues are going to look like next year, and given that we have negotiations on several contract fronts coming up next spring, I would certainly rather look at this next spring as opposed to right now. I think if I am correct, this was not included in the budget for the year, and I would like to see it considered in the following budget year, if it's possible. I mean, we don't know what our requirements are going to be, what our revenues will be, what our expenses will be with the ongoing issues of the COVID-19. And I am concerned what our needs will be academically for the children and for the district as a whole. So I will, at this point in time, knowing that, listen, I'd like to have a lot of money too, so that we could get more certified school nurses, put the librarians back full-time in all of our buildings, and those kinds of things. Who knows if we're going to need more social workers or whatever. So at this point, I will not be supporting the assistant business manager position.
I take it you'd like that item broken out separately.
I think it would be most helpful.
Okay,
Very
can
well.
can we withdraw the original motion and make another one that says we're doing A through or I through I guess?
Well, or I can just vote, when you call for your, your consented,
Okay.
vote, I'll just say, I vote negatively on. So if that helps you, so you don't have to have another motion on the floor.
All right, then in that case, first of all, any other questions or comments? If none, could we have a roll call vote on this, please?
Yes. Mrs. Fryrick,
But I'm not clear. How do you want me to vote? Do you want me to do my negative vote as part of the whole thing, or what are we doing here?
If this is one group, you're voting yes or no on that entire group.
I don't want necessarily, I just want to vote no on the assistant business manager position. I don't want to vote.
Then we have to back out and do these as an individual thing.
Okay, then perhaps we will have to do that. I'm sorry about that.
All right. So again, Joel, did you make the motion, Joel?
Rich.
Rich did.
Robinson, and Mrs. Schrader.
Rich, could you modify your motion to be only everything but the business manager?
Sure. You have before you the personnel report, which includes positions and athletics extracurricular. Let's see. Since a board member has had questions and would like these items considered separately, I move that we consider positions, items A, B, I can't see the rest of it. A, B,
It would have to be
A1 and 2
A1,
and B.
2, and B.
A1 and 2 and B. Couldn't have put it better myself.
Yeah,
Second.
I'll second that.
Okay.
I didn't mean for it to get this complicated.
That's all right, Ellen. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
So other questions about that? Then this motion can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Now we need a motion for the creation of the business manager, which is I.
I move that we. Beg your pardon?
So
Go
moved.
ahead.
Okay.
Okay, we have a move and a second. Other questions or comments? Could this be a roll call vote, please?
Absolutely. Mr. Posnell,
Yes.
Mr. Sears,
Yes.
Mr. Sanders,
Yes.
Mrs. Fryrick,
No.
Mrs. Schrader,
Yes.
Mr. Scalette,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Tillman,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
8-1.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson, would you like to continue on with your legislative update?
I certainly would, since that concludes the personnel report. Legislative update, where to begin? As many of you may know, Mr. Sears and I will be meeting with State Senator Arnold on September 8th to review a number of different topics, among them cyber charter reform, protection, mandate relief, liability protection, and a discussion about the prevailing wage. In addition, for those of you who are not able to attend the Springersbury meeting of Springersbury Township Planning Commission, there was a fascinating discussion on floodplains, and who doesn't enjoy a fascinating discussion on a floodplain, and a revision of police headquarters for Springersbury Township. Nothing that really directly affects the district. That concludes my report if there are no other questions.
Thank you. Ms. Frarick, LIU.
Do we have to do anything about the Pennsylvania School Boards Association officers' elections, Mr. Robinson?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Fryer, for reminding me. We have until October, I believe, to vote on the PSBA officers. So we'll have ample time to review the positions and the information supplied. There is only one office, to the best of my knowledge, that is being contested, and that is for the office of the Vice President. All other offices are not contested. So if you do not have the information, please let me know. I will get it to you, and we can discuss it at the next board meeting or at our leisure. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you. Ms. Frarick.
Now it's my turn. The LIU, we do not have a report from the LIUJOA. They are looking forward to their first fall meeting coming up in September. York Adams Academy, I am pleased to report that York Suburban has all 15 of their seats currently filled by active students. We have 85 students who return to begin the school year, which is amazing, and we're still hunting and chasing down about 10 from last spring. Those students, their home districts have been so notified, and once we hear back from the districts, we'd like to hear soon so that we can then fill those seats with other students. We are doing testing on a weekly basis, some of it via the internet and people's home computers. Other students are not as nimble on their use of technology, and they have come in. We have set up very strict guidelines as far as distancing and handling of materials and things like that. And we are testing 3 and 4 students a week for York Adams Academy. So we are very pleased with the way school has begun. We're going to continue probably on a monthly basis for the foreseeable future, but are willing at any time, should all circumstances return to really good circumstances in this county, going back to in-person classes. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Ms. Chichuli, York Adams Tax Bureau.
There's no report.
Okay, thank you. York County School of Technology, Ms. Schrader.
Yes, the School of Technology had a couple of last-minute COVID-related resignations this year, but fortunately the administration was able to hire replacements in time for the start of the school year. First day for students in the first cohort at the School of Technology was today. For the record, their enrollment is 1,712 students. Regarding the gym construction, the project is moving along pretty much on schedule. The roof installation is the ongoing project these days. And unless there are questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you. I would like to take this time to welcome and thank any of our visitors that are watching us on YouTube. You have the board meeting schedule link here. And Vince, do we have any additional public comments? Or Wendy? I'm not sure who's managing the comments.
And I'll go ahead and put it up.
Okay, thank you.
This is so cool.
Hope.
There's Zoom.
That's all we have.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you then. And if there's nothing else, we can be adjourned.